Hi, this is Simon Upstill and welcome to another tutorial for Motion 5. And today we're going to be taking a look at creating this shimmering ocean effect. Now the fun part about this is that I've rigged it up so that we can affect the scene quite dramatically by simply changing this ambient lighting here. And you'll see that as I change the colour, that's really changing that look. And then I can adjust the intensity. So very easily we can adjust this to get a different kind of effect. Now it's not a very complicated project in the sense of compositing the final result. Where the interest lies is in building the individual elements that go up to make this. So that's what we're going to start with first. We're going to make a set of pre-rendered elements and then composite them within this particular project. So let's go ahead and make a new project. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make it 3840 by 3840, so a square project that's effectively 4K. I want 10 seconds, 24 frames a second is going to be good. So first of all, I'm going to add a clouds generator to this. So generator clouds, and let's set it up. I'm going to reduce the scale down to 2000 by 2000. And I'm going to reduce the vertical scale down to 8 and the speed down to 0.3. And then I'm going to make a duplicate of this clouds, right-click duplicate, and I'm going to move it out into a new group. And I'm going to call this group displace. And I'm going to turn it off. Then I'm going to come back down to the clouds and I'm going to come to filters, distortion, and I'm going to look for bump map. And I'm going to use that second clouds as the source for the bump map by dragging it into there. I'm going to set the direction to 0 and the amount to 0.4. And I think you can see how that's dramatically improved the appearance of that. Already we're getting something that's looking much more like waves. So I'm displacing one image by an exact copy of itself. Okay, let's do a few more things with this. What I want to do with this group, with my main clouds in it, is come to filters, tiling, and random tile. And what I want to do is set up this group here by setting it to fixed resolution and turning the width and height to 3840, which is our overall project dimensions, so 3840. Now, back in this displace group, I want to duplicate this clouds. So right-click duplicate. I'm going to set this one to 3840 by 3840. And I'm going to set the horizontal scale to 64 and the vertical scale to 24. And then I'm going to open up the gradient. I'm going to drag this in a little bit, drag the white in a little bit like that. And I'm going to turn this black one to 50% grey, so 0.5, 0.5, and 0.5. Then I'm going to come back down to my main group here, and I'm going to apply an image mask. So right-click, add image mask, and I'm going to take that second clouds and use that as the source. And we'll need to switch the source channel to luminance. And what that's done is just giving us a more patchy effect, so not everything is quite so uniform. And one final thing I want to do is I want to come down here and select the rectangle mask tool. I'm just going to roughly draw one like that. And then I want to set the mask blend mode to subtract, and I want to invert it. Let's just set this size to 3840. And then what we're going to do is we're going to feather it inwards. So at a roughly minus 320, I think should do us. I just need to center up that mask by resetting its transform. And this is just fading off the edges of our element like that. Just want to do one other thing with that clouds that we've used as the mask. I'm going to come to filters, distortion, and I'm going to grab underwater Let's increase the size to 2.4, the speeds down to 0.01, and the refraction all the way up to 200. And that's giving us a little bit more sort of undulation within that mask element. And one final thing I've forgotten to do is to set up the random tile the way that I want it. So I'm going to increase the radius all the way up to the maximum of 512, and I'm going to set the feathering to roughly 1.2, I think should do it. So then we get something like this. So what we're now going to do is we're going to save this project. So File, Save As. Let's save this as waves. And then we're going to come to the Share menu, Export Movie. This is new in 5.4.4. It will look different if you're in an earlier version of Motion. Let's select ProRes Proxy. That's going to be perfectly good enough. We don't want any of this stuff. Turn all that off. And then we're going to hit Next, and that will save it out as waves, like so. Okay, so let's move on and make a new project. Again, let's make it 3840 square, 10 seconds long, 24 frames a second. This time we're going to add generators cellular. Just going to reduce the speed down to 0.2. And then what I'm going to do is add a generators gradient. And let's open up the gradient editor. Let's make this white, this black. Let's drag the white to the middle, or we could set its location to 50%. And let's hold down the Auto Option key and drag the black over to the left-hand side like that. Set the Y start and end to 0, and the X start to -1920, and the X end to +1920. So then what we're going to do is we're going to add an image mask, right-click, Add Image Mask, and we're going to add that cellular as the image mask and switch to luminance. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to the cellular, open up its properties and come to its scale. And we're going to set the X scale to 500. And what this is giving us is this sort of elongated ripples, which is the effect that I'm looking for here. And I'm also going to add a filter to that cellular. So come to Filters, Glow, and I'm going to add a glint. And you can see that's enhanced the effect quite a bit. Let's just increase that intensity to 2.65. And finally, let's add to this group an rectangular image mask like we did before. So select the rectangular mask tool. Let's reset its transform. Let's set its scale to 3840. Its blend mode to subtract. And invert the mask. And let's feather it in -320. And this is going to be a really useful element. Now, there's one thing about this that I don't quite understand, which is that the first couple of seconds appear to fade up, and that's something we don't want. We obviously want it to be a continuous effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and change the duration to 12 seconds. Select that group, come to the end here, hit O on the keyboard so everything is running for that full 12 seconds. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to 2 seconds on the timeline and hit Alt-Command-I, or we could come up to mark play range in, like that. Then let's save this. I'll save this as ripples. And again, let's export it. So export movie. Again, ProRes Proxy is fine. And again, let's use the play range here rather than the entire project. So we'll export that 10 seconds, and we'll be chopping off those first 2 seconds that appear to fade up. And let's hit Next and render that out. So let's move on and make the third of our 4 elements. So new project. Again, I'm going to set it up once I've made it. And again, it's going to be, you've guessed it, 3840 by 3840. And it's going to be 24 frames a second, 10 seconds long. So this time around, we're going to use the caustics generator to create some little wavelets. So let's come to generators caustics. Now the caustics on its own is not much use to us, but once we've done a little bit of processing with it, it's going to be just fine. So first of all, I want to reduce the size down to 0.1, and that speed, let's bring down to 0.1 as well. Then what we want to do is add another generator, and this is going to be a clouds. Let's set the horizontal and vertical scale to 16. Again, reduce the speed down to 0.1. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to animate the Y offset with a ramp behavior. So open that up and let's add a parameter behavior ramp to the Y. And let's set an N value of 0.25. Sorry, not 0.25, negative 0.25. I wanted to move down, not up. So it moves down like that. So then what we're going to do is turn these clouds off, and we're going to use it as an image mask for the caustics. So right click, add image mask, and let's add the clouds and set the source to luminance. And that's made this a lot more patchy. But what we're also going to do is we're going to add filters, distortion, bump map to this caustics layer. And again, we're going to use that same clouds as the source for the bump map. And this is what's going to make it much less like that basic caustics element and more interesting. So drop that in there. And you can see that that's sort of shifted everything around a bit, and it's looking much better, I think. So let's set the direction to 90. And that's giving me this kind of little wavelet effect that I want. And again, we just need to do that same trick with the mask. I'll very quickly do that. I don't need to explain it too much to you. 3840 for the size. Subtract and invert and center it up. And sorry, we just need to feather it in, negative 320. And again, what we're going to do is save it. Let's save this as wavelets. And again, let's render it out. Come to the share menu, export movie. Again, proxy will do. And we want to have, the entire project is fine. So let's hit next and save that out. So let's make our final element. Create a new project. Again, let's set it up in the usual way. It's going to be 3840 by 3840. And again, it's going to be 24 FPS, 10 seconds long. We're going to use the cellular generator again. So let's grab that. Just going to set the size to 6 and the speed to 1.25. Then we're going to add a clouds generator to act as a mask. So generators clouds. I'm going to have a horizontal scale of 48 and a vertical scale of 32 and a speed of 1.25. Then I'm going to add this as a mask to the cellular. So right click, add image mask, drag the clouds in there. That's turned off the clouds. And let's set the source channel to luminance. So again, we've got this much more patchy result, which is what we want. Just want to come back to the clouds and open up the gradient here. And I'm just going to sharpen up the results by just pulling those two values in. So I've got much more defined patches like that. So I'm also going to add a couple of extra filters to this cellular element. So I'm going to add distortion wave. Leave that as the defaults. Just helps break it up just a little bit. I'm also going to add a glint to this. So glow glint, and this is what's going to give us our sparkles. So let's just set up our glint. Let's increase the exposure to 3. The glint size I'm going to reduce to 0.5. Streaks I'm going to set at 2. The intensity I'm going to set all the way up to 3. And I don't want any color fringing, so set that to 0. Then I just want to come back to my image mask and invert it. And then I'm also going to come into the cellular, open up the gradient here, click on the black tab there and set that location to 30. And now that's much more the effect that I want. And one final thing I want to do is select the image mask and add color levels. And let's open up the histogram, select the white out and set that value to 0.93. You can see that's just giving us a little bit more of an infill to those darker areas, but it's not as bright as the others. So that's looking like this, and that's going to give us this nice sparkly texture. So again, we just need to add that rectangular image mask. Don't need to explain how to set that up. Rectangular mask tool, set the size to 3840, set the blend mode to subtract and invert and -300, I think in this instance. Come to properties, reset. Okay, so again, we want to save this. Let's call this Sparkles. That's saving the project as Sparkles. Let's come to the share menu. Again, ProRes proxy is fine. We're going to, I've just remembered what I've forgotten. You're ahead of me. Because we were using this cellular, we have that same fade up problem. You'll notice that there. And we need to change the project duration to 12 seconds. Select the group, come to the end, hit O on the keyboard to extend it. And then we want to come to 2 seconds on the timeline, Option Command I, or mark play range in. We want to make sure that our other play range marker is at the end there. And now we're ready to export. And we're going to use play range only. And that's going to be fine. Next, save it out as Sparkles. So those are our elements, and we can start now combining them. So let's start on the fun stuff. I'm going to make a new project. And this time we are going to set it up as 1920 to 1080, 10 seconds long, 24 frames a second. We're going to come to import. I'm going to look for the elements that we've created there, these MOVs that we exported out of our 4 projects, and we're going to click import, bring them in. And what we're first of all going to do is select them all 4 of those, set their blend mode to linear dodge. Again, with them all selected, I want to open up the rotation there and set the X rotation to -90. So in order to be able to see what we're doing, I'm going to add a camera. We will allow it to switch to 3D. The camera's rotation is going to be -30. And for the position, I want 200 pixels on Y. So then I'm going to select all of these elements inside here, and I'm going to duplicate them. And with those duplicates selected, I'm going to open up the position there, and I'm going to set this Z value to -3650. And what that's going to do is, you've probably seen there, it's going to make a double length of these. So we've got further to travel with our camera. Let's just set up that camera animation. So select the camera, basic motion, throw, and let's set that value to -200 on Z. And that gives us this, which is already starting to look pretty good. So I also want to add some lights. So add object light. The first of these I'm going to make ambient. I'm going to just reduce that intensity down to about 20 just to get us started. Then I'm also going to add another light, and this is going to be a point light. So I'm going to come to its position, set the Y position to 200 and the Z position to 0. And I want to fall off of 15. I'll come back to the beginning. We should be able to see where that light is. It's there like that. So I'm going to duplicate that twice. The first copy, I'm going to set its Z position to -1920, and the third copy to -3840. So let's back off in the distance. And this is just giving us this illuminated central path. It'll be easier to see once we've added in a few more elements. I'm going to come to this group here, and I'm going to add object generators gradient, and I can move it right to the back of that group, and let's set it up. I want to set its width to 3840, and the height, let's go for something like 8500, like that. And what we want to do is set its X rotation to -90. And let's set up the gradient. First of all, let's set this color to white, and this other color to black. So the white click on it, set its location to 50%, black, click on it, drag it, holding down the Alt or Option key over to the extreme left-hand side like that. Then now let's set up the positions here. The X start is going to be negative 1920. The Y start is going to be 0. The X end is going to be positive 1920. Y end is going to be 0. And what I've done here is I've effectively created this bright central path as though the sun is in the background there. What I'd also like to do is come right to the top here, make a new group, and I'm going to add generators, color solid, going to make it black, going to move this group, which you'll note is 2D, all the way to the back of my project. And that just ensures that everything has a solid alpha channel. We're compositing everything against black. So the other thing I want to do is I want to select the sparkles and the ripples here, come to properties, and I want to set their respective lighting to off, because I don't really want them, I want them to be sort of light sources, not being hit by the lights themselves, because they look dull if you do that. So if we turn the shading off, you'll notice the difference that makes, that these now really sparkle and give this beautiful effect like that. So I think it's quite a good idea if we group these different elements together, these pairs of elements. So right-click, group, and that's the sparkles. Do the same with the ripples. Right-click, group, wavelets, right-click, group, waves, right-click, group. And then for each group, let's come over and set its blend mode to linear dodge. And this is just in case we want to affect one of those individually. And in actual fact, I think those wavelets, as you can see, are pretty faint. So what we can do is come in and add filters, color, levels, and let's just punch up the whites, just give them a bit more presence there, something like that. So obviously at the moment we're all in black and white, and the question arises, what can we do about the color? As I showed you at the beginning, we can use this ambient light very much as a kind of global color control, and as we move that around, we can globally affect the color of the scene. Another thing we can do is to come down to the gradient, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to linear dodge, and what I can now do is change the color of that background solid. So, for example, like so, if I want to give it an overall blue cast, because this background color is now controlling everything, because everything above it is being simply added to that base color. So that's another handy thing we can do. So the lighting's all possibly a little bit bright, and we could come back to that ambient and reduce that down to maybe 5, and we've got this sort of look. We might also decide that these lights here are a little bit too strong, or actually what we might do is just reduce their fall off like that, and reduce their intensity down to about 50. So that's that. With all three of them selected, I can affect those parameters simultaneously. So I like that it's a little bit patchy, but I don't want it to be too obvious that we've got those three lights there. I mean, if you wanted that to be a little bit more defined, you could double up on those lights and put one in between each of the two outer lights. But let's leave this like this for now. And I just want to look at adding some text. So I'm going to come to this master group here, select the text tool, I'm going to type R under the shimmering sea. Let's center it all up, increase the size substantially. Let's reduce the line spacing. Let's reset its position. Let's set a -90 rotation on X. And then let's come back to appearance, and let's make this face color dark like that. And we need to move its Z position so it's a lot further back. Let's go for -2500 or something. And then it will start to appear like that. The other thing I want to do here is I want to just add some blur to that face value there, so it looks a little bit more underwatery. 10 is too much. Let's go for, 4 will do. And then I'm going to come to Filters, Distortion, and I'm going to select Bump Map. And I'm going to use one of the waves elements here as the source for the bump map, like so. And you can see how that's rippling under the effect of that waves element. Possibly a little bit too much, so let's go for 0.05. Don't want to spend too much time on this. You get the overall idea. And to make this look as though it's actually under the water, we need to put some of these elements back over the top. I'm going to take that ripples group and move that to the top above. And you can see the difference that makes. That immediately looks like it's more under the water. We could also do the same with the sparkles group. Move that right to the top. And that will put the sparkles over the top as well. So I don't necessarily want to make a definitive version of this, because as you've seen, there's lots of ways in which you can customize it. I just want to show you, for example, this is what it's like if we add in those 2 extra lights that I was talking about. Make that light path a little bit more pronounced. We can also come down to the gradient, open up the gradient editor and bring in these black tabs. So you see that sort of clears out a bit of the sides, gives us a little bit more contrast, so we've got more of an obvious sort of center path to the light. So that can look nice. The other thing it's quite interesting to do is to link these 3, or rather these, what have we got now? We've got 5 point lights together in terms of their color. So if I were to select the second one, add parameter behavior, link it to the first one there, and then just copy that link onto the others. So Command C, Command V, Command V, Command V for that. Then I can come to the first point light here, and we can use that to change the color of the path. You see that can make it look more like it's sort of a sunset effect. And if I wanted, for example, to create the sense of the sun being just off the top of the screen there, we could come to the top here, create a new group, make sure that's 2D, and add generators lens flare. Move this to the top of the screen by entering a value of 540 on Y, maybe a little bit more than that. Let's try 640. We actually want it off the top of the screen. We could increase its intensity, adjust the fall off downwards, increase its size, really push up the streaks. We could even change its color so it's warmer. And you can see that the difference that makes. Because that's a 2D group, that's going to sort of stay at an infinite distance in the background. So as I say, this is not a definitive version. We could spend a lot more time finessing it. Anything we do to these individual elements is going to make a great deal of difference. So there I've added a levels to the, this is the ripples here, crunching the blacks a bit to make them just a little bit more defined. All depends on the kind of look we're actually going for. So I hope that's given you enough pointers to be going on with, and I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again another time.